I spent the night with an incredibly handsome guy at a hotel. When I woke up, terrified of being taken advantage of, I bolted out the door. The next day, a Rolls-Royce blocked the entrance to my office building. The window rolled down, revealing a face so devastatingly handsome it could make the heavens jealous. "Shall we settle the service fee?" he said, waving my dropped employee card. Samantha, marketing intern. After being pushed into the backseat of the luxury car, he slowly undid his tie. "Last night, I provided full service. Now, it's your turn to compensate me." When I stepped out of that limousine, I felt relieved, thinking everything was resolved. But then he suddenly parachuted into our department and announced before the entire team, "Samantha is promoted to full-time staff. From now on, you are my personal administrative assistant." Thick blackout curtains in the hotel suite blocked the morning sunlight, allowing only a sliver of light to crawl across the carpet. My head throbbed as if someone were drilling into my temples with an electric drill. I groaned, my consciousness struggling to surface from the murky depths. An unfamiliar sensation enveloped me. The mattress beneath me was too soft, the air thick with the crisp scent of pine and an indescribable, intensely masculine aura. My eyes snapped open. A cold, opulent space met my gaze. The furniture's lines were sharp and angular. An expensive black suit jacket lay casually draped over an armchair, clearly not mine. My eyes shifted stiffly. The bed beside mine bore a hollowed-out indentation, and a few short strands of jet black hair clung to the pillow. Fragments of last night's party flooded my mind, deafening music, dazzling lights, drink after drink handed to me. Then what? I only remembered stumbling toward the bathroom, as if I'd wandered onto the wrong floor. Then, burning skin, heavy panting, suffocating kisses, and those astonishingly bright, deep gray eyes in the dim light, like a wolf, carrying a predatory hunger to tear me apart and devour me. It was over. My blood rushed to my head, then drained away completely, leaving me cold. I practically sprang upright, the thin blanket sliding off me. The unfamiliar silk nightgown made my scalp tingle. Glancing around, the faint, terrifying sound of water from the bathroom made my heart race. Fear gripped my heart. A one-night stand? With a stranger? Blackmail? Harassment? Horrifying headlines from the news flooded my mind. I couldn't stay here a moment longer. Adrenaline surged, drowning out the hangover's dizziness and the body's secret aches. I hastily pulled back the blanket, standing barefoot on the expensive, icy wool carpet, my eyes darting frantically. My clothes! Last night's light blue dress lay crumpled like a wilted flower, pitifully abandoned in the corner. Underwear. Oh God, on the armrest of the single sofa on the other side. I sprinted over at top speed, snatched my garments, and pulled them on without bothering to remove my pajamas. My fingers trembled so violently I couldn't zip up the dress after several attempts. The sound of water in the bathroom stopped. My heart skipped a beat. No time. I snatched the nearest phone, its screen still lit, displaying a city nightscape panorama as its lock screen, and shoved it into my bag. Like a startled deer, I stumbled toward the door. The faint click of the lock unlocking sounded like thunder to my ears. I yanked the door open, slipped out, and sprinted down the thickly carpeted hallway with all my might, not looking back. My high heels thudded hollowly and urgently, like my own heartbeat. Inside the suite, the bathroom door swung open, releasing a wave of steamy heat. Alexander Kane stood wrapped only in a loosely draped towel around his waist, droplets rolling down his sculpted chest and defined abs. He casually wiped his damp black hair, his deep gray eyes lazily sweeping the empty bed before settling on the rumpled sheets and my soft white robe scattered across the carpet. He walked to the bedside, his fingertips brushing the spot where I'd lain, which seemed to retain a trace of soft warmth and a faint sweet scent. His gaze fell on the nightstand, where he discovered his phone was missing. Alexander walked calmly to the window, his fingers parting a sliver of the heavy blackout curtains. Below, my slender figure in a light blue dress darted out the hotel's side entrance like a startled rabbit, scrambling into a taxi that had just pulled up. In her haste, she nearly stumbled. The car sped away. Alexander drew the curtains shut, sealing the room in darkness once more. A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched his lips, a subtle yet unmistakable hint of certainty. He walked to the sofa, bent down, and with long, slender fingers, retrieved a small, stiff card from the crevice between the cushions. It was something I'd dropped in my haste to flee. Printed on it were the company logo, my photo, my name, and my position. Samantha. Marketing Department. Intern. Alexander gently traced the innocent yet stubborn face on the card, his deep gray eyes swirling with hidden currents. He picked up the suite's internal phone, his voice low and steady, carrying his usual commanding presence. Front desk, check last night's. The following evening, the setting sun bathed the skyscraper's glass facade in a warm golden glow. Dragging my exhausted body, I struggled through the company's grand revolving doors. Yesterday's hangover and fright, compounded by a day spent trembling under my department head's critical gaze, left every bone in my body aching and weak. All I wanted was to rush back to my rented apartment, bury myself under the covers, and forget that chaotic, dangerous night entirely. I lowered my head and quickened my pace toward the subway station. Beep, a brief, deep honk sounded from the side, carrying an undeniable presence. I instinctively looked up. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom, its lines as fluid as a moving work of art, glided silently before me, precisely blocking my path. The pure black body gleamed with a cold, noble sheen in the setting sun. My heart skipped a beat. An ominous foreboding instantly gripped me. The dark-tinted rear window silently lowered. A face emerged. Features chiseled like a finely carved sculpture, a high, straight nose, thin lips pressed into a stern, straight line. Most striking were the eyes, deep gray, like an ocean brimming with energy before a storm. They locked onto me now, piercing through everything with an unmistakable, predatory intent. It was him! The man from the hotel! My blood seemed to freeze, then surge backward in a frenzied rush. My mind went blank, filled with only one thought: run. I spun around and began running in the opposite direction. Yet my movement was a split second too slow. The instant I turned, the rear door of the Rolls-Royce swung open. A long leg, encased in tailored trousers, stepped out with astonishing speed. Alexander Kane took a step forward, his towering frame radiating overwhelming pressure, effortlessly cutting off my escape route. His movement was precise and powerful, no rough tugging, just a deft sweep of his arm that trapped me between him and the cold metal of the car. That faint, cool pine scent mingled with his unique body odor forced its way into my senses, instantly reminding me of the burning heat of our skin touching last night. My body trembled uncontrollably. Samantha. Alexander's voice was deep and rich, carrying clearly through the evening breeze like a cello string plucked lightly yet with undeniable authority. He leaned in slightly, close enough for me to see each distinct lash and my own panicked reflection in his eyes. His long fingers held a small card, my employee ID, the one I'd left behind in that luxury suite yesterday. His fingertips traced the photo on the card, a hint of amusement flickering in his deep gray eyes, like a hunter admiring prey caught in a trap. You ran fast enough. His tone was calm, devoid of emotion. Now, shouldn't we settle the service fee? Service fee? Those 3 words struck me like an electric current. The hazy, sensual fragments that had relentlessly assaulted my mind last night suddenly sharpened into clarity, his scorching palms gliding over my skin, the low, sensual breaths echoing in my ears, those deep gray eyes burning with fire in the darkness. A wave of heat surged to my cheeks, crimson spreading rapidly to my ears. I was so embarrassed and flustered I felt like I might explode right there. Instinctively, I protested, what service fee? I don't know what you're talking about. My voice tightened with tension and shame, a faint tremor in it. Alexander watched my flushed cheeks and panicked eyes, the teasing in his gaze deepening. He didn't immediately counter, instead calmly absorbing my embarrassment. His free hand slowly rose, elegantly beginning to undo the expensive silk Windsor knot around his neck. The precision of his fingers was serene, carrying a lazy sense of control and a hint of unsettling implication. Last night, he lowered his voice, its husky magnetism making each word tap sharply against my taut nerves. I provided full service. Very dedicated. He paused deliberately, his gaze lingering half a second on my slightly parted lips, his eyes dark and stormy like the depths of the ocean. Now, he released the tie, the smooth navy fabric hanging loosely from his fingers like some kind of restraint poised to strike. Isn't it time for your compensation? The word compensation was drawn out slowly and deeply, carrying an intense, unashamed desire. My heart spun wildly, pounding like a drum in my chest. I wanted to retreat, but my back was pressed against the cold, hard body of the Rolls-Royce, leaving me nowhere to go. His towering frame loomed over me, his powerful presence enveloping me completely, carrying an absolute sense of pressure and a primal, leg-weakening masculine allure. He shifted slightly, his arm no longer a barrier but an irresistible invitation, pointing directly toward the open rear seat of the Rolls-Royce, gaping like the maw of a beast. Please. Alexander's voice carried an unquestionable elegance and commanding tone, his deep gray eyes locked firmly on me. The current swirling within them conveyed one clear message: I had nowhere to run. The air inside the compartment felt thick as molasses, each breath carrying a searing heat. Alexander's relentless gaze and blunt declaration bound me to the leather seat like invisible chains. Against the vast power disparity and the confined luxury of the space, any thought of resistance seemed feeble and laughable. The car finally entered the heavily guarded underground garage of an upscale apartment building, gliding silently into a reserved parking space. The elevator ascended directly to the top floor. As the doors opened, I was met by an interior of extreme austerity. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the dazzling city skyline stretched out like an unfurled galaxy. The interior dominated black, white, and gray, its lines clean and sharp, immaculately pristine, expensive yet cold. It mirrored Alexander Kane's first impression on me, powerful, flawless, unreachable, radiating an aloofness that kept others at arm's length. But this icy order shattered the moment I stepped inside. The door had barely closed behind me, and before I could even take in the full view of the foyer, a powerful force suddenly seized me from behind. Alexander's warm palm, wielding an irresistible strength, grabbed my wrist and yanked me backward with a sharp tug. Ah! I gasped sharply as my body slammed uncontrollably into a hard, scorching chest. Alexander's arms wrapped around my waist like a resilient steel band, trapping me securely within his embrace. His scorching breath instantly sprayed across my sensitive earlobe and neck, triggering a series of tiny shivers. That breath was searing, carrying a desperate, long-suppressed desire that instantly ignited my memory. Fragments of last night's chaotic sensations flooded back like a tidal wave. I started to struggle, but my voice was cut off. Alexander lowered his head, seizing my lips with precision. This was no gentle kiss. It brimmed with unquestionable dominance and fierce possessiveness, like conquering territory. His breath enveloped me completely. His tongue forced its way past my teeth, carrying clear aggression and a mark, deep entangled. My mind went blank. All resistance crumbled instantly under his strength and skill. Some dormant instinct deep within me awoke, a strange, dizzying current spreading through my body with his lips and tongue. My legs grew weak, yet my hands pushed futilely against his rock-hard chest, unable to budge him. He held me close, deepening the predatory kiss, his stride unbroken as he practically dragged me away from the cold entryway. My back slammed into softness, the enormous, expensive-looking dark gray sofa in the living room. Alexander pinned me down. The sofa was wide and springy, instantly enveloping my falling body. His heavy frame descended, completely shrouding me in his shadow. A brief separation of lips allowed me to gasp for air, but the next second, an even fiercer assault came. Alexander's kisses traced down my slender, vulnerable neck, leaving wet, hot trails like branding marks. His hands weren't idle either, expertly and urgently pulling down the zipper at the back of my dress. The rustle of fabric echoed distinctly in the overly quiet space, carrying a heart-stoppingly suggestive quality. The cold air touched my suddenly exposed skin, sending an involuntary shiver through me. But the next moment, it was replaced by Alexander's scorching palm. His fingertips, calloused yet astonishingly hot, traced my bare spine like an electric current, triggering a series of uncontrollable tremors and faint whimpers. Wait, I finally found fragments of my voice, choked with tears and panic. I tried to twist my body away from the overwhelming touch. Alexander paused. He lifted his head, propping himself up slightly. In the dim light, his deep gray eyes burned like smoldering coals, fixed intently on me. His own breathing was heavy, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, revealing his own struggle to restrain something. Yet he did not press his advantage. Samantha, his voice was unusually hoarse, carrying a potent sexual magnetism, yet unexpectedly tinged with confusion, not entirely coercive. He raised a hand, his long fingers gently brushing the damp strands from my forehead. The gesture carried an almost tender focus, jarringly out of place in the current atmosphere. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice low and piercing. I was forced to meet his gaze. His deep gray eyes burned with raw, unbridled desire, threatening to consume me. Yet beneath that hunger, something else lurked, a hint of something I couldn't quite grasp. Sincerity? "Tell me," Alexander's fingertip traced the flush on my cheek, his gaze locked on mine with an inescapable, commanding intensity. "Are you afraid of me?" My lashes fluttered violently, my lips parted, yet no sound emerged. Fear? Yes, fear of his power, his dominance, this spiraling chaos. Yet deep within me stirred a complex emotion I dared not examine, a secret longing for this formidable body? Or a hazy memory of last night's sensory overload? My silence seemed to be interpreted by Alexander as acquiescence. His deep gray eyes darkened slightly, a fleeting hint of frustration and deeper desire flickering within. He leaned closer, his thin lips brushing my earlobe, his scorching breath sending shivers of tingling heat through me. Don't be afraid, his voice whispered into my ear, carrying an oddly soothing power yet brimming with dangerous allure. This time, it's your turn to take the lead. Before I could fully grasp the meaning, Alexander seized my wrist, guiding my hand to the buttons of his shirt. His gaze locked onto mine, encouraging yet demanding, holding an unquestionable expectation. Undo it, he commanded, his voice low and husky, like a spell. When my fingertips touched the cool, smooth lapis lazuli button on Alexander's shirt, I jerked my hand back as if burned. Reason screamed at me to stop, yet a strange, ignited desire deep within me, combined with the intense anticipation in his eyes, formed a powerful vortex, pulling me into an uncontrollable descent. With a slight tremor, my fingers finally landed on the first button. My movements were clumsy and deliberate, each unbuttoning like unwrapping a dangerous yet irresistible gift. As the buttons parted one by one, Alexander's defined pectoral muscles emerged beneath the open shirt. His honey-toned skin glowed seductively in the soft, indirect light of the living room, each muscle pulsing with pent-up power. Alexander remained perfectly still, only lowering his gaze to watch me. His deep gray eyes held a stormy intensity, each clumsy touch making his breathing heavier. He was like a dormant volcano, calm on the surface, yet molten lava churned within. As the final button came undone and the expensive shirt slipped from my trembling hands, falling onto the carpet, a suppressed growl escaped Alexander's throat. Unable to endure this slow torture any longer, he seized my wrists and thrust me deep into the sofa. Skin met skin seamlessly, the scorching touch sending shivers through both our bodies. This time, there was no barrier of clothing, no hesitation of testing. Alexander's kiss was like a wildfire, sweeping in with devastating passion. From my trembling lips to my sensitive neck, he descended, igniting clusters of quivering flames across my pale skin. His hands, carrying astonishing heat and strength, explored every curve of my body, each touch precisely igniting that unfamiliar, surging emotion within me. My resistance crumbled completely, overwhelmed by a force more primal, more powerful. Like a small boat adrift in a raging storm, I clung desperately to his broad shoulders and sturdy back, my nails leaving faint red marks on his taut muscles. Fragmented whimpers and intermittent moans escaped my lips uncontrollably, intertwining with his heavy panting. Within the vast, opulent penthouse, they wove the most primal of melodies. My body was utterly exposed, filled completely. The sensation of being fully possessed carried the sting of first-time pain, swiftly replaced by an overwhelming sensory flood. Alexander's formidable physique and astonishing endurance were undeniable. He controlled the rhythm, shifting from fierce, storm-like intensity to a deliberate slowdown, teasing my taut nerves with an exhausting, torturous tenderness. Each deep thrust carried a reverent exploration and a possessive desire that seeped into my very marrow. Sweat soaked our tightly pressed skin, the air thick with an intoxicating scent of desire. I felt myself tossed high into the air only to crash back down, my consciousness oscillating between peak ecstasy and chaotic dizziness. Helplessly, I could only endure and respond, utterly lost within the storm he had conjured. Outside the window, the city's neon lights flickered silently, like a vast, quiet spectator witnessing the burning, uncontrolled heat consuming this cold apartment. After an unknown duration, an unprecedented blinding white light exploded in my mind. My body tensed like a bowstring stretched to its limit, erupting in a shattering scream. Alexander let out a low, satisfied sigh, clutching my trembling form as if holding a long-lost treasure. The storm finally subsided. Heavy panting echoed through the silent space. I collapsed limply onto the sofa, feeling as though every bone in my body had been dismantled and reassembled. My muscles ached and felt weak, unable to muster even a shred of strength. My pale skin was dotted with suggestive red marks, like tiny red flowers blooming in the snow, bearing witness to the madness that had just unfolded. Alexander propped himself up, sweat dripping from his chiseled jawline. His deep gray eyes still held an unyielding desire, like a sated predator, gazing intently at the dazed figure beneath him, radiating languid sensuality. He leaned down and placed a kiss, almost tender, on my sweaty forehead. Morning sunlight poured unimpeded through the enormous floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the cool-toned luxury apartment in a warm golden glow. I awoke to an intense ache throughout my body. As consciousness returned, vivid, passionate images from the night before flooded my mind like a tidal wave. My eyes snapped open to reveal an unfamiliar, alarmingly high ceiling and a sleek, minimalist chandelier. I lay in a bed absurdly oversized, my body sinking into an impossibly soft down comforter. The air seemed to carry a faint, cool pine scent, mingled with a lingering, decadent residue of debauchery. I tried to move, but excruciating pain shot through my lower back and inner thighs, making me gasp sharply. My body felt like it had been repeatedly run over by a heavy truck, every joint screaming in protest. The faint sound of running water drifted from the bathroom. Alexander Kane. The name struck like lightning, splitting the fog of confusion. I snapped awake. Everything from last night, being cornered outside the office building, dragged into a car, taken back to the apartment, and that exhausting, seemingly endless compensation that drained every ounce of my strength, came flooding back. Shame, anger, fear, and a faint, indescribable complexity of emotions tangled together. I couldn't stay here any longer. Not for a single second. This time, my movements were more determined than at the hotel. Despite the searing pain throughout my body, I practically rolled off the wide bed. My eyes darted frantically around until they finally landed on my rumpled light blue dress, draped over the footstool at the end of the bed. My underwear. My face flushed as I found it on the carpet beside the bed. Ignoring my body's protests, I frantically pulled the dress on, my fingers clumsy with pain and tension. The zipper caught midway, and I grew so flustered sweat beaded on my nose. The sound of water in the bathroom seemed to grow fainter. Fear gripped my heart once more. I yanked hard. Rip. A faint sound, and the zipper snapped off in a small piece. I couldn't care less. I roughly smoothed the torn fabric, grabbed my small commuter bag, and rushed barefoot toward the entrance like a thief, silently yet with blinding speed. My hand touched the cold doorknob. Holding my breath, I glanced back one last time. The bathroom door was still shut. I twisted the lock hard, darted out, and sprinted toward the elevator without looking back, frantically pounding the down button. The elevator doors closed, followed by the sensation of weightlessness as we descended. I leaned against the cold cabin walls, gasping for breath. Every part of my body screamed in agony, especially between my waist and legs. The slightest movement sent sharp jabs of pain through me. I looked down at my crumpled dress with its torn zipper and my bare feet. The high heels had been left in the living room last night. I looked like a wreck, as if I'd just escaped a disaster. An indescribable humiliation washed over me. Twice. I had run away from that man. Each time more disheveled than the last. The elevator reached the first floor. Head bowed, I hurried through the equally luxurious yet cold lobby, ignoring the curious stares from the front desk. Barefoot, my feet pressed against the cold, smooth marble floor as I dashed out the apartment doors. The cool morning breeze brushed my face, bringing a hint of clarity, yet it couldn't dispel the fog in my mind or the lingering imprint of that man on my body. I hailed a taxi and gave the company address. Leaning back in the seat, I watched the street scenes rush by outside the window before closing my eyes in exhaustion. It was over. This time, it should truly be over. We were even. That arrogant man would never deign to pursue a lowly intern like me again, right? The aching in my body constantly reminded me of last night's events, and also reminded me that the brief, uncontrolled, chaotic affair between Alexander Kane and me, like parallel lines mistakenly intersecting, had finally drawn to a close. Stepping into the company's bright and bustling office area, I felt as though I'd returned to reality from a bizarre fantasy world. The rhythmic clacking of keyboards, the ringing of phones, and the hum of hushed conversations all imparted a peculiar sense of tranquility. I deliberately kept my head down, trying to ignore the lingering aches in my body and the persistent oddness in my heart, hurrying toward my workstation. Fortunately, the marketing intern spot wasn't too conspicuous, and no one noticed my slightly pale complexion or the crumpled, partially broken zipper on the back of my skirt. No sooner had I pulled out my chair and sat down than Sarah, a colleague I usually got along well with, slid her chair over, her face radiating uncontrollable excitement and a hint of gossip. "Samantha! Have you heard? Explosive news!" Sarah lowered her voice, her eyes sparkling with astonishing intensity. My heart skipped a beat, and a sense of foreboding crept over me. What news? I forced my voice to sound calm. "The big boss. Alexander Kane." Sarah nearly jumped up with excitement. "Our mysterious, elusive CEO. He's back. And, the kicker is," she took a deep breath, as if about to announce something earth-shattering. "Word is he suddenly dropped into our marketing department this morning. He's meeting with the president right now." "Oh my God! Is he as drop-dead gorgeous in person as you said? Does he have a 2-meter-8 aura?" I heard he. I didn't hear a single word of what Sarah said next. Alexander Kane, back? Dropped in. Marketing? Those words pierced my mind like ice picks, instantly freezing the blood in my veins. Every ache in my body became excruciatingly sharp, mocking how naive and absurd my morning relief, "finally, it's over," had been. Wasn't he the untouchable, distant head of the conglomerate? Shouldn't he be surveying us all from the top floor? Why was he suddenly here? In my department? A chill shot from my feet to my scalp. My face drained of color, my fingers trembled uncontrollably. That suffocating sensation of being targeted by a predator, with nowhere to run, engulfed me once more intense, more desperate than in the car or the apartment. Samantha? Samantha, what's wrong? You look so pale. Sarah finally noticed my distress and asked with concern. And no. Nothing, I snapped back to reality, my voice dry and raspy. I quickly lowered my head, pretending to organize the scattered papers on my desk. Probably didn't sleep well last night. I forced a smile, but it looked worse than crying. Just then, the door to the marketing director's office clicked open. The once bustling office fell instantly silent, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Every pair of eyes turned involuntarily toward the doorway. John, the marketing director, wore a fawning smile, his back slightly arched in deference as he respectfully ushered someone out. Alexander Kane. He wore a flawlessly tailored, immaculate dark gray bespoke suit that accentuated his towering, imposing stature. Morning light filtered through the glass curtain wall, casting a sharp, perfect silhouette upon him. His expression betrayed no emotion, those deep gray eyes, like a cold lake, scanned the silent office area with detached indifference. An innate authority radiated from him, spreading silently. Everyone whose gaze met his instinctively held their breath and bowed their heads. He stood there like a young emperor surveying his domain, powerful, cold, and utterly unapproachable. My heart stopped beating entirely. Frozen in place at my desk as if under a spell, I even forgot to breathe. Overwhelming fear and the absurdity of being toyed with by fate gripped me. All I could do was pray he wouldn't notice me, pray he wouldn't deign to remember my insignificant face. Alexander's gaze seemed to sweep casually across the room, lingering on no one in particular. With long, powerful strides, he walked toward the office exit, closely followed by John, the marketing department manager. 1 step, 2 steps. My taut nerves relaxed slightly, and I nearly collapsed into my chair. Maybe he really hadn't noticed? Just as Alexander was about to pass my workstation, his figure nearly disappearing around the corner. His footsteps halted without warning. The already quiet air in the office froze to a standstill. Alexander turned slowly, very slowly. Those deep gray eyes, like a frozen lake, locked precisely and unwaveringly onto the slender figure in the corner, me, who wished she could sink into the earth. His gaze lingered on me for a full 2 seconds. From my lowered eyes, unable to conceal my panic, to my chest rising and falling slightly with nervousness, to the crumpled, broken zipper on the back of my light blue dress. No one could discern the intensely complex emotion that flashed deep within his eyes. Time seemed to stretch infinitely. Just as I felt myself on the verge of suffocating and fainting, Alexander's lips moved slightly. His voice wasn't loud, even carrying a professional detachment, yet it thundered through the silent office like a bolt of lightning, reaching every pair of ears that had perked up. He lifted his perfectly chiseled jaw slightly, gesturing toward me with a calm, effortless tone, the intern in the blue dress. In an instant, the gazes of dozens in the marketing department converged on me, my face as pale as paper. I was spotlighted. Alexander Kane's voice wasn't loud, yet it pierced the office's deathly silence like a steel needle through ice. Dozens of eyes instantly locked onto me, fixed with curiosity, shock, schadenfreude, or pure scrutiny. I felt as if I'd been stripped naked under a spotlight. My cheeks burned fiercely, my fingertips grew numb and icy, and all the blood in my body rushed to my head before freezing solid in an instant. Yes, Mr. Kane. Supervisor John responded immediately, bending his waist even lower, his face plastered with a cautious smile. But when he turned to me, his expression instantly hardened. Samantha. Stand up. Mr. Kane is addressing you. Almost instinctively, I stiffly rose from my chair, my legs weak and trembling, barely able to stand. I kept my head down, staring intently at the worn tips of my shoes, unable to meet the gaze of the man standing in the center of the light. Alexander's eyes lingered on me for a terrifying 2 seconds. That gaze felt like it had tangible weight, piercing through my thin clothing, scrutinizing every inch of my disheveled state and feigned composure. He even glanced once more at the broken zipper behind me, his gaze so deep it was impossible to fathom. Name. He spoke, still in that cold, businesslike tone. Chin. Samantha. My voice was a whisper, trembling uncontrollably. Internship performance. Alexander finally shifted his gaze from me to the trembling supervisor John beside him. John immediately rattled off a perfunctory response. Mr. Kane, Samantha is currently an intern in the marketing department. Her work ethic is diligent, but she lacks experience and is still learning. There were a few minor errors in last week's data analysis report, but as a newcomer, it's understandable. He deliberately exaggerated my insignificant mistakes, attempting to portray himself as uncompromisingly strict before the CEO. Alexander listened expressionlessly, his deep gray eyes devoid of emotion. When John mentioned errors, my heart sank violently, my fingernails digging deep into my palms. I knew it was over. Under this man's absolute authority, my minor slip-ups would be magnified beyond measure. Yet, just as John was about to conclude his somewhat disparaging critique, Alexander abruptly cut him off. Enough. The voice wasn't loud, but it carried an unquestionable finality. John's words stopped abruptly, his obsequious smile frozen on his face. Alexander turned his gaze back to me, still bowed in silence. His eyes felt like a tangible spotlight, leaving me nowhere to hide. His thin lips parted, each word crystalline and sharp as hail striking the ground, sending a silent shockwave through the quiet office. Effective immediately, Samantha's internship is terminated. She is now a full-time employee. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the suddenly pale face of Supervisor John and the stunned, speechless colleagues surrounding us. Then, enunciating each word deliberately, he declared, position, Chief Executive Officer's Executive Assistant, reporting directly to me. WH what? Supervisor John gasped, his eyes widening like saucers. He couldn't comprehend the sudden, utterly illogical appointment. An intern, parachuted straight into the president's executive assistant role? It was pure fantasy. The surrounding colleagues gasped in disbelief. Their gazes toward me instantly brimmed with incredulity and intense jealousy. President's executive assistant. That was a position countless people dreamed of, one they fought tooth and nail for and still couldn't attain. Why me? I too froze completely. I jerked my head up, locking eyes with Alexander's deep, unfathomable gray gaze. Those eyes were calm, utterly still, as if merely stating an ordinary decision. Yet beneath the surface lay something I couldn't decipher, something complex, beyond comprehension. Was it control? A declaration of ownership? Or, some deeper, terrifying intent? Why would he do this? Keep me under his watchful eye? This wasn't a gift, it was roasting me over an open flame. Was this another, more dreadful form of compensation? Mr. Kane. This is not in accordance with protocol. John panicked, desperately trying to salvage the situation. Samantha is inexperienced and lacks the necessary qualifications. Protocol? Alexander's lips curled into a faint, bone-chilling smile. His gaze pierced John like an icy spike. My word is protocol. His gaze returned to me, carrying an authority impossible to resist. You have 10 minutes to pack your things and report to the chief executive's office. With that, he turned away without another glance at anyone, striding out with a steady, oppressive pace. He left behind a deathly silence and countless stares that felt like they could burn right through me. Sarah's mouth hung open for a long moment before she found her voice. She tugged at my sleeve, her tone strained. Samantha, you and Mr. Kane. My body went cold, my thoughts a chaotic whirl. Alexander's final look had been icy and unyielding, devoid of any warmth, carrying only an order that burped no defiance. I felt like a marionette, forcibly yanked off my original path by invisible hands and hurled into the center of a deep, dangerous vortex. Under John's nearly fiery glare and the complex, unreadable stares of my colleagues, I numbly gathered my meager personal belongings as quickly as possible. That small cardboard box now felt heavy as if filled with lead weights. 10 minutes later, I stood before the elevator reserved exclusively for the chief executive officer. The illuminated elevator doors reflected my pale, panicked face, trapped like a bird in a cage. My finger trembled violently as I pressed the button symbolizing the pinnacle of power. The elevator ascended silently, its weightlessness making my heart sink. I knew that stepping through that door would turn my life upside down. And that man, Alexander Kane, sat behind the massive desk symbolizing absolute power, waiting for me to walk into his trap. The door to the president's office slid open silently, releasing a crisp pine scent mingled with the faint aroma of ink and paper. The vast, empty space unsettled me. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows spanning an entire wall lay the dazzling city skyline. Alexander Kane sat behind his massive black desk, his gaze fixed on a document. In the bright natural light, his profile appeared stern and focused. He heard the sound but didn't look up, merely saying calmly, "Sit." His voice held no warmth, as if he were merely instructing someone to fetch an insignificant item. I stood stiffly in the doorway, clutching my small cardboard box, my hands and feet icy cold. Glancing around the vast office, I saw only Alexander's massive desk, a set of expensive-looking leather sofas against the wall, and a low coffee table. Where was I supposed to sit? On the sofa? Or on the floor? Your seat is over there. Alexander seemed to sense my confusion and finally looked up. His deep gray eyes scanned me without emotion, casually gesturing with his pen toward a spot in front of his desk. A brand new office chair, computer, phone, and stationery were already neatly arranged there, simple and efficient, yet carrying an invisible pressure. It was too close to him. Like a programmed robot, I stiffly walked over and placed the box on the empty desk. The cold surface sent a shiver through me. "This is your next assignment," Alexander said, pushing a thick folder toward me. "Familiarize yourself with the group's core business structure, the functions of its main departments, and my schedule for the coming week. Every detail must be flawless." His tone was entirely formal and businesslike, devoid of any unnecessary emotion, as if everything that had happened last night and this morning had been nothing but my own illusion. This deliberate detachment and businesslike coldness only made me feel more adrift. I would have preferred him to possess me forcefully again like last night rather than be imprisoned in this golden cage under the guise of work, enduring an invisible torment. "Yes. Mr. Kane," I murmured, struggling to keep my voice steady. The days that followed felt like purgatory. Alexander was an exceptionally demanding, efficiency-driven boss. His directives were precise, rapid, and demanded near perfection. I had to summon every ounce of focus just to keep pace. A single data discrepancy, an inaccurate schedule, any slip earned his icy stare and terse, oppressive questions. He no longer mentioned compensation, avoided any private contact, and scarcely acknowledged my presence. Yet his omnipresent, powerful aura and absolute need for control felt like invisible chains binding me tightly. What tormented me more were the stares from others. My sudden rise from an unknown intern to someone closest to the center of power sparked endless speculation and jealousy. Rumors about how I'd climbed the ladder spread like a virus throughout the company. In the break room, restrooms, even when passing in the hallway, those looks of contempt, curiosity, or outright jealousy pierced me like needles. I became the connection getter or the scheming bitch in everyone's eyes, a fragile porcelain doll who'd climbed to her position through underhanded means. That lunch break, I sat down in a corner of the cafeteria with my tray. No sooner had I settled in than the murmurs from a table of female employees from another department drifted over clearly. The volume wasn't loud, but I heard every word. "Hey, look at the president's assistant. Talk about a bird flying up to the branches. Who knows what tricks she used?" I heard Mr. Kane personally requested her from the marketing department. "Wow, that's pretty outrageous. She's nothing special looking, plain as can be, nothing remarkable. I really don't get what he sees in her. Maybe she's just good in bed?" "Shoo. Keep your voice down. Don't let anyone hear. But that fake aloofness she puts on is so disgusting. Who's she trying to impress, exactly? She always puts on the serious act in front of the CEO. People who don't know better think she's so competent. But she just slept her way to the top." The harsh words pierced my heart like poisoned arrows. My fingers clenched the cutlery so tightly they turned white. Humiliation washed over me like a cold wave, engulfing me in an instant. I leapt to my feet, barely touching the food on my plate, desperate to flee the suffocating place. Yet, after taking just 2 steps, a woman carrying coffee, Lisa Chin, the meticulously made-up assistant to John, the marketing director, who supposedly coveted the CEO's assistant position, deliberately shifted her body to block my path. "Oh my!" Lisa exclaimed dramatically as the coffee cup in her hand just happened to tilt, spilling half its steaming brown liquid. It drenched my white blouse completely. Ah! The searing heat and sticky coffee stains made me cry out in pain, leaving me utterly disheveled. My white shirt was instantly stained with large patches, clinging tightly to my skin in a messy, embarrassing display. All eyes in the vicinity instantly turned to me, some curious, some sympathetic, but most relishing my misfortune. "Oh! I'm so sorry, Samantha." Lisa clutched her mouth dramatically, yet her eyes flashed undisguised malice and a hint of triumphant amusement. My foot slipped. "Look at you, not paying attention where you're walking. Such a shame to ruin a new shirt like that. But Mr. Kane pays you well enough to buy a new one, right?" The snickers around us stung my eardrums. I stood rooted to the spot, the coffee stain on my chest burning hot while my heart felt frozen. Rage, humiliation, helplessness, emotions churned violently in my chest, threatening to tear me apart. I bit down hard on my lower lip, tasting a hint of iron, barely suppressing the stinging tears welling up. Just then, a cold, piercing voice swept through the noisy restaurant like a Siberian blizzard. Seems the marketing department still isn't working hard enough. The entire restaurant fell into a deathly silence, as if the slightest vibration could be heard. Everyone froze, staring in terror toward the source of the voice. Alexander Kane had appeared at the restaurant entrance without anyone noticing. Tall and imposing, he stood like a drawn sword. His dark gray suit jacket hung casually over his arm, revealing a crisp white shirt and a deep gray vest that accentuated his broad shoulders and narrow waist. His face bore no expression, his eyes like a cold lake. He scanned the room calmly, finally settling on me, drenched in coffee, eyes red-rimmed yet stubbornly biting my lip, and on Lisa Chin beside me, clutching an empty coffee cup, her face still bearing a trace of smugness before turning instantly ashen. He strode forward with long, deliberate steps, each one seeming to tread on everyone's heartstrings. An immense pressure spread silently, causing the restaurant's temperature to plummet. He walked straight to me, his towering figure casting a shadow over me. He didn't look at my disheveled shirt, but fixed his gaze on my lips, which I was biting down on so hard they were slightly bleeding. His deep gray eyes darkened imperceptibly for a moment. "Mr. Kane," Lisa's voice trembled uncontrollably, her face as pale as paper. Alexander didn't even glance at her. He removed the coat from his arm and draped it naturally over my thin, slightly shivering shoulders, a coat carrying his warmth and the crisp scent of pine. The broad coat instantly enveloped my coffee-soaked upper body, shielding me from the awkward stares and the chill in the air. This gesture felt like a silent, yet weighty declaration. My whole body shuddered. Wearing this coat still warm with his heat, my nostrils filled with his scent. The stubborn resolve I'd been clinging to nearly shattered. I dared not lift my eyes to meet his. Only then did Alexander slowly turn to Lisa, who was trembling so violently she could barely stand. His voice was low, yet it carried clearly to every corner of the room. It was cold, like a verdict. "Lisa Chin, note, shares the same surname as the female lead, but is not the same person, senior marketing specialist. During lunch break, you maliciously slandered a colleague and deliberately created trouble, disrupting the company's harmonious atmosphere." With each word, Lisa's face drained of color. Pursuant to Chapter 7, Section 3 of the Employee Conduct Code, Alexander's tone remained utterly unflinching, as if reciting legal text. "You are terminated. Effective immediately. Human Resources will process your departure." "No. Mr. Kane. It's not like that." Lisa screamed in collapse, desperately trying to defend herself. Alexander raised his hand, and a simple gesture silenced her completely. His gaze was as sharp as a blade. "The surveillance footage and over 20 witnesses present at the scene are sufficient evidence to support my judgment. Do you need me to retrieve the footage and have security escort you out?" The final sentence carried an unmistakable threat. Lisa instantly collapsed to the floor, her face ashen, daring not to utter another sound. Alexander's icy gaze swept over the silent crowd, each glance like a tangible blade of ice slicing across their faces. "The company hired you to create value, not to stir up trouble or bully colleagues. I expect no recurrence of such incidents. Otherwise, you will bear the consequences." The entire restaurant fell deathly silent, even breaths audible. Everyone was stunned into submission by this thunderous display, their gazes toward me instantly filled with awe and fear. Not a single voice dared to speak. Alexander's gaze finally settled on me, still bowed. His tone softened slightly, yet remained commanding. "Come with me to my office." With that, he turned without another glance and walked straight out. I pulled the coat, still carrying his scent, tighter around me, shielding myself from the uncomfortable stares and the lingering stickiness of the coffee stain. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my spine and followed the tall, powerful figure under the gaze of countless complex eyes. This time, I did not lower my head. Back in the top-floor office, the door closed behind me. Cut off from the outside clamor and prying eyes, the vast space held only the two of us. The courage that had sustained me in the restaurant vanished instantly, replaced by waves of exhaustion and resentment. I slipped off the coat, placing it carefully on the nearby sofa, and murmured, "Thank you, Mr. Kane." "The coat. I'll take it to the dry cleaners." "No need," Alexander interrupted. He stepped toward me, coming very close. That powerful, oppressive presence enveloped me once more. Unlike his businesslike demeanor in the dining room, his deep gray eyes now resembled a turbulent, deep sea, fixed intently on my reddened eyes and the small, slightly jarring trace of blood on my lip. He raised his hand. I instinctively tried to step back, but his other hand gently pressed against my shoulder. His fingertips carried a faint coolness, touching my injured lips with an almost tender pressure, a contrast to his earlier demeanor in the restaurant. His touch lightly brushed the blood, bringing a subtle sting and an indescribable tingling sensation. My heart skipped a beat, my breath catching. I was forced to lift my head, colliding with his bottomless gray eyes. Within them churned complex emotions I'd never seen before, lingering cold fury, clear possessiveness, and a hint of something I couldn't quite name, yet felt almost like heartbreaking focus. "Does it hurt?" he murmured, his voice low and husky, carrying a peculiar magnetism that seemed to pierce the depths of one's soul. This sudden, almost tender touch and inquiry made my heart race faster than his thunderous actions in the restaurant. I froze in place as if under a spell, unable to do anything but stare at his handsome face mere inches away, feeling the heart-fluttering touch of his fingertips, my mind going completely blank. Alexander's gaze lingered on my face, from my startled eyes to my slightly trembling lashes, then to the faintly swollen lips his fingertips had touched. His eyes grew darker, his breathing heavier. That familiar, aggressive heat began to pool within them. Just as I thought he would force himself on me like before, he slowly withdrew his hand. His fingertips seemed to still carry the soft memory of my lips. "Go inside and freshen up," he said, gesturing toward a closed door off the office, his private lounge and ensuite bathroom. "There are clean towels and clothes inside." His tone had returned to its usual calm, but the faint, lingering warmth on my lips and the unresolved current in his eyes were like a stone tossed into a still lake, sending ripples of unsettling turmoil through my chaotic mind. The lounge door closed behind me. Leaning against the cold panel, my frantic heartbeat gradually slowed. This space resembled a miniature version of a luxury apartment, sharing the same minimalist, austere style. Yet the crisp scent of pine wood hung thicker in the air than in the outer offices, as if completely saturated in Alexander's aura. I stepped into the spacious bathroom. The enormous mirror gleamed, reflecting my current disheveled state, pale face, reddened eyes, a small wound on my lips standing out starkly, and a large, stained coffee blotch on my chest. I removed the ruined shirt and carefully wiped the sticky residue from my skin with warm water and a towel. A chill from the air conditioning sent a shiver down my spine. Opening the wardrobe, I found several neatly hung men's shirts and casual wear, all Alexander's size, expensive yet understated. After a moment's hesitation, I chose the plainest-looking one, a deep gray cotton shirt. The oversized shirt fit me like a child wearing an adult's clothes, the hem nearly dragging to my thighs, the cuffs needing several turns to roll up. Yet the soft fabric enveloping my body, carrying his unique, cool, and heart-fluttering scent, strangely offered a sliver of security. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, wearing his clothes, as if his fingertips still lingered on my skin. The silent protection he offered by draping his suit jacket over me in the dining room, and the almost tender inquiry when his lips touched mine, it played like a spell in my mind. I couldn't understand. He could have treated me as before, with cold commands and fierce possessiveness. Why this change? Was it sudden kindness? Or a more dangerous trap? Filled with confusion and questions, I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Alexander wasn't seated behind his desk. He stood before the enormous floor-to-ceiling window, his back to me, gazing out at the bustling city lights. The fading sunset outlined his tall, slightly lonely silhouette. Hearing the sound, he turned around. When his gaze fell upon me, I was wearing his oversized shirt. His eyes darkened noticeably for a moment. The shirt hung loosely over my slender frame, the collar slightly open, revealing a sliver of delicate collarbone. The cuffs were rolled up, exposing pale wrists, while the hem fell to reveal two straight, long legs. I was completely enveloped by his aura, radiating a pure innocence and an intensely alluring aggressiveness. A powerful, primal urge swept through him in an instant. His Adam's apple rolled imperceptibly, his gaze turning fiercely predatory. Uncomfortable under his gaze, I instinctively tugged at the shirt's long hem and murmured, "The clothes. I'll wash them and return them to you." Alexander didn't respond. He took a step toward me. 1 step, 2 steps. That oppressive pressure returned. My heart leapt into my throat, and I instinctively wanted to retreat. "Don't move," his deep voice commanded. He stopped before me, close enough to feel each other's breath. His gaze sank deeply into my face, as if examining a long-lost treasure. Then, he raised his hand. I thought he was going to touch my lips again and nervously closed my eyes. But the anticipated touch didn't land on my lips. His fingertips gently brushed the slightly damp strands of hair at my forehead, the movement carrying an indescribable, almost tender softness as he tucked it behind my ear. His fingertip accidentally grazed my sensitive earlobe, sending a faint electric tingle through me. I snapped my eyes open, colliding with his bottomless gray gaze. The emotions churning within were so complex they sent a chill through me. It was no longer mere desire, something heavy, something beyond my comprehension, seemed intertwined within it. "Does it still hurt?" he asked again, his voice deeper and rougher than before, his eyes fixed on the wound on my lip. I shook my head, then nodded. My mind was a tangled mess, utterly clueless how to handle this man before me, one who shifted between cold and hot, whose behavior was utterly unpredictable. Alexander's gaze didn't waver, instead, it fixed on me with even greater intensity, as if trying to see through my very soul. Silence flowed between us, the air thickening with an electric, ambiguous tension. The potent scent of his testosterone mingled with the cool freshness of pine, invading my senses with an overpowering intensity that made my heart race and my cheeks burn. "Samantha," he finally spoke, his voice low and deliberate, tinged with an unprecedented gravity. Each word struck the taut strings of my heart with precision. "Tell me. What exactly are you afraid of?" What was I afraid of? Afraid of his power, afraid of his unpredictability, afraid he could crush me as easily as he crushed Lisa, and most of all, afraid I might surrender myself to this dangerous vortex. I opened my mouth, but not a single syllable escaped. Alexander watched the fear, confusion, and struggle flickering in my eyes. A faint, almost defeated emotion flashed in the depths of his gaze, but it was quickly replaced by deeper resolve. He leaned in slightly, closing the distance, his hot breath brushing my cheek. "Afraid I'll treat you like I treated Lisa?" He cut straight to my thoughts, his gaze sharp. "Or are you afraid?" He paused deliberately, his eyes sweeping over me with aggressive heat as I stood in his shirt. "Afraid I'll force myself on you?" My body tensed instantly, my fingertips turning icy. It was one of my deepest fears. Yet Alexander chuckled softly, the sound tinged with self-mockery and a certain certainty. "Look at me," he commanded. I was forced to meet his gaze. I admit it, Alexander's voice was low and clear, tinged with tentative honesty. At first, it was attraction, an urge to possess. Keeping you confined by my side was a means, and a selfish desire. He openly acknowledged his base motives. My heart sank. But, he shifted his tone, his gaze becoming intensely focused and profound, like a vortex that sucked me in. "What happened in the restaurant made me see something." His fingertips, with the utmost gentleness, traced the small, scabbed wound on my lip once more, a gesture carrying an indescribable respect. "Seeing you bullied, coffee thrown at you, biting your lip to hold back tears," his deep gray eyes brimmed with clear anguish and cold fury. I had only one thought. He paused, then spoke each word with crystalline clarity, an unquestionable force and an odd, almost vow-like tone. "My woman. Only I am allowed to bully her." Those 4 words, "my woman," thundered like a bolt of lightning in my ears. I stared at him, eyes wide with disbelief. Alexander's gaze didn't waver. It held only an almost obsessive possessiveness, and something deep and intense I'd never seen before. Therefore, he leaned in slightly, his nose nearly touching mine, their hot breath mingling. His voice was low as a spell, deadly seductive and unquestionably declarative. "From this moment on, stay by my side. Let me protect you, clear every obstacle for you, and pave any path you desire." His words carried the force of the most domineering promise, capable of shattering any resistance, yet they also bore a weight that made my heart tremble, a weight that was profound and solemn. This was not a tone of negotiation, it was an unshakable decision. My thoughts were utterly chaotic. Refuse? What could I possibly refuse? Accept? What did this even mean? Adoption? Or, another form of imprisonment? Why? I finally found my voice, trembling with confusion. "Alexander, what do you truly want?" This was the deepest question that had long haunted my heart. Power? He possessed it. Women? They were within his grasp. What could I, Samantha Chin, a penniless intern, possibly offer that would warrant such relentless pursuit? Alexander stared at me intently, his deep gray eyes brewing an unfathomable storm. He didn't answer immediately. Time seemed to freeze. The last rays of the setting sun cast a warm golden glow on his angular profile, yet failed to soften the profound depth in his eyes. Slowly, he raised his hand. This time, with deliberate certainty, his touch landed on my cheek. His palm was warm, the fingertips, calloused yet gentle, softly caressing my delicate skin. The motion carried an almost reverent tenderness. "What do you want?" he echoed my question, his voice deep and gravelly, each word scraped from the depths of his chest, carrying scorching heat and an unyielding resolve. He leaned closer, his thin lips brushing against mine, slightly parted in shock. Their hot breath mingled as a low, clear answer, like a branding iron, seared deep into my soul. I want you. He paused briefly, his deep gray eyes locking onto mine for a moment of stunned stillness, delivering that long-planned, ultimate confession, one capable of burning away all reason and boundaries, clearly, word by word, into my ears. From the very beginning to the very end, I want you. Samantha, he called my name with an unprecedented, almost sighing tenderness. I knew you were different from that chaotic morning at the hotel. His gaze lingered on my face, from my clear yet stubborn eyes, to my small, straight nose, to my scarred lips now pressed tightly together in nervousness. It was no longer the gaze of one sizing up prey, but rather the contemplation of a precious lost treasure. The way you panicked and ran, like a frightened fawn, left a claw mark on my heart, he murmured softly, his fingertips brushing my cheek with extreme gentleness. I found your ID. Looking at the photo, I had only one thought: find her. I couldn't let her slip away like that. My heart pounded faster, threatening to burst from my chest. I never imagined such a journey lay beneath his domineering exterior. Later, when I stopped you in the company parking lot and brought you to my car, Alexander's eyes flickered with a mix of resolve and sincere regret. Back then, I was indeed angry and consumed by possessiveness. No one had ever treated me that way before. He gave a self-deprecating chuckle. Taking you back to the apartment was impulsive and selfish. I wanted to prove something, and I wanted to keep you firmly trapped. His candor made my heart tighten. I recalled the chaos and intensity of that night, my cheeks flushing again. But this time, alongside the embarrassment, there seemed to be a different kind of flutter. But Alexander shifted his tone, his gaze becoming profoundly serious. Transferring you to work with me wasn't purely selfish. In the restaurant, his eyes suddenly turned cold, lingering anger visible, but when he looked at me, it swiftly gave way to concern. Seeing you bullied, coffee thrown at you, biting your lip and refusing to bow your head, my heart felt like it was being torn apart. In that moment, I truly understood what I wanted. It wasn't just to keep you by my side as some kind of possession. I want you to have the courage to chase your dreams, to never have to look at anyone's face, to never suffer any injustice. Samantha, will you? Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights began to flicker on one by one, like a starry river woven just for this moment. Inside the office, the air seemed to freeze, only the echoes of our rapid heartbeats reverberating in the silence. All fear, doubt, and resentment melted away like ice in this instant. Seeing the unmasked depth of affection, respect, and reassuring promise in his eyes, my final defenses crumbled completely. A vast, bittersweet warmth surged in, instantly filling my entire chest. Tears finally broke free, sliding down my cheeks, tears of happiness. I hesitated no longer, retreated no further. Raising myself on tiptoe, I stretched out my arms and for the first time, took the initiative to wrap them tightly around Alexander's neck. Burying my face deep into the warm hollow of his neck, carrying the scent of coal pine, my voice trembled with tears yet remained clear and resolute as I whispered into his ear, I do, Alexander. I do want to stay by your side. At that moment, Alexander's body visibly trembled. The next second, he tightened his arms around my waist with such force it felt like he wanted to merge me into his very blood. He lowered his head, finding my lips with perfect precision. This kiss was no longer a plunder, nor a punishment. It was the ecstasy of something lost and found again, a tender, lingering embrace filled with love. He kissed me carefully, deeply, as if handling the most precious treasure in the world. I closed my eyes, responding with my whole being. Tears slipped between our entwined lips, salty yet sweet, adding only to the sweetness. After a long while, Alexander reluctantly pulled back slightly, his forehead still pressed against mine. His deep gray eyes brimmed with stars and an intense, unwavering love. He raised his hand, wiping the tear streaks from my cheeks with the utmost tenderness. No more crying, his voice carried a teasing smile, my little assistant, from now on, you only need to smile. My tears dissolved into a smile, my cheeks flushing crimson like blooming peach blossoms. Days later, a soft knock sounded on the CEO's office door. Come in, Alexander's deep voice echoed. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. Today, I wore a tailored, elegant business suit, my face adorned with a confident, composed smile, a stark contrast to the flustered intern of days past. Holding a document, I walked briskly to the massive desk. Mr. Kane, this is the final draft of the marketing department's new quarterly promotion plan for your review. My voice was clear and pleasant, carrying a touch of professionalism and an almost imperceptible sweetness. Alexander lifted his gaze from the papers. His deep gray eyes fell on me, softening instantly. He set down his pen, leaned back slightly, and watched me calmly. Call me Alexander, or, he deliberately drew out the last syllable, a hint of teasing flashing in his eyes, darling. My cheeks flushed instantly. I shot him a playful glare, though the laughter in my eyes was impossible to hide. Placing the documents on the desk, I said earnestly, at work, it's best to stick with Mr. Kane. Boss. Sir. Alexander chuckled softly, rose, and walked around the desk to stand beside me. He took my hand naturally, intertwining our fingers, his gaze tender yet resolute. Fine, as you wish. But after work, he leaned closer, whispering in my ear, call me dear. My cheeks flushed deeper, yet I didn't pull away. Instead, I squeezed his hand tighter. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight streamed in, illuminating the entire city. He had paved my path in the workplace, and I, in turn, used my resilience and radiance to light up the once cold world he inhabited. Our story began with a chaotic encounter and ultimately reached the most perfect ending.